we're now going to look at the entrepreneur visa, which is a visa to establish or join in a business in Hong Kong. So the vernacular business investment visa and entrepreneur visa are fundamentally the same thing. You're going to be an entrepreneur stroke business investor, or you're going to be deemed a startup. And a startup is, as I've couched it here, you're an accommodated business investor. So there's two ways to approach this particular category of visa in Hong Kong. You're going to be a standalone entrepreneur, or you're going to be a supported entrepreneur. You're going to be deemed a startup. What's the difference between the two? Let's break it down. So as a business investment visa holder, as an entrepreneur, you have to pass the approvability test, where you demonstrate you can contribute substantially to the economy of Hong Kong. On the other hand, if you're going to be deemed a startup, that is an accommodated business investor, what you do is you seek to get yourself admitted onto a government-accredited program offered by the likes of Cyberport, Science Parks. I think Investigate K have got one. Start Me Up. There's a dozen, half a dozen, 8, 9 programs that are accredited. It's a separate application from the visa, but you go through the process of getting yourself accepted onto one of those accredited programs, and then any shortcomings that might otherwise fall within the ability to satisfy the approvability test as a business investment visa and entrepreneur, those shortcomings are overlooked, and the Immigration Department will grant favourable consideration to the applicant. So it's kind of like filling in the forms, showing that you've been accepted onto the accredited program that's recognised by the Immigration Department, obviously, and then you get your ticket to ride. But, you know, the two things are very separate. It's one thing, you know, being able to persuade the Immigration Department they've got a decent business plan that can contribute substantially to the economy of Hong Kong. It's another thing, again, to be able to go through the myriad sort of, you know, criteria and policy diktats that are in play in the various accredited programs that the qualifying organisations put forth. And of course, you know, you've got the competition that goes with getting accepted onto those accredited programs. So those are the two pathways, in a sense, into entrepreneurship as a foreign national in Hong Kong. Generally speaking, if you get a startup approval, then you get a 24-month visa. As a business investment visa as an entrepreneur, as you'll see as I go through the nitty-gritty of the approvability criteria, ostensibly the general employment policy dictates that you're going to be getting a 24-month visa initially. However, in about 50% of the cases, the Immigration Department will grant only a 12-month visa, and they'll subject the performance of the enterprise underpinning the approval of the visa to a review of its performance to see to what extent it's contributing to the economy of Hong Kong, to determine exactly how long the next visa is going to be under extension of stay applications. So the Immigration Department talk about a 2-year, 3-year pattern of visa grant. My experience is in 50% of the cases, if you qualify as an entrepreneur, as a business investor, you're only going to get 12 months. So you're going to be subject to business review. They like to hold you on a short leash. The acid test, in my experience, has been that if at the time of approval, as an entrepreneur rather than a startup, if you've already hired local employees, the Immigration Department are generally satisfied that you're contributing to the requisite level to be worthy of the 2-year visa as denoted under the general employment policy. But set your clients' expectations that even though it says 2 years, you might get more than likely 1 year, and then you're going to be put through, you know, a review exercise. That's the bad news. The good news is that as long as the entrepreneur is actively carrying on the business, and it's clear that you know, you're seeking to, you know, implement the plan in accordance with the, you know, documents that were put into the Immigration Department leading to the grant of the visa in the first place. The Immigration Department don't want to sort of, you know, throw logs at the feet of entrepreneurs. They want to encourage this. And so as long as you're cracking on with the plan, knowing that, in a sense, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy, as it were, the Immigration Department will grant you, upon business review, an extension to your visa. Might be for 12 months with business review in play the next time around, or they might be satisfied that the contribution that you're making thus far having undertaken the review, is sufficiently robust enough for you to get a 3-year visa and get onto the 3-year visa, well, 1 year, 3-year, 3-year visa pattern of round, and removing the business review condition at the point of granting you the 3 years at the time of extension. So those are the 2 pathways in. And as I said, business review and then the 3-year extension once you have undergone the business review process or otherwise. So what's the approvability test? Well, you have to show substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. Go back to that. Substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. Or, as I've said, how long is a piece of string? So before I go into the sort of meat and potatoes of the approvability criteria, there's one point to clear up here, and I've called it the catch-22. And the catch-22 is very often, a bone of contention with entrepreneur visa applicants, because we have to show that we can contribute substantially to the economy of Hong Kong. But if you're here as a visitor, you're precluded under visitor conditions to joining in the business, because you need to have the entrepreneur visa in order to join in the business. So generally, you can't join in the business until you've gotten the entrepreneur visa. But you can't get the entrepreneur visa until you can show contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. And as you'll see, the requirements for under the approvability criteria mean that you need to objectively demonstrate that you can contribute substantially to the economy of Hong Kong. But because you've got visitor permission, for the most part, creating the new facts on the ground, the question is begged as to whether or not those activities amount to you having joined in the business. And so you've got a kind of a snail eating its tail. You can't join the business until you get the permission of the immigration department. You can't get the permission of the immigration department until you show contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. And you can't show contribution to the economy of Hong Kong without joining in the business. So I say here the test requires that you show only prospective, not immediately observable contribution. And generally speaking, the immigration department will not prosecute for breach of conditions of stay as long as you've got an active application in the system for this particular visa type, and any questions arising as to whether or not some activity that you are showing to the immigration department to prove that you can contribute substantially to the economy of Hong Kong might conceptually be a breach of your conditions of stay. They will, generally speaking, close their eyes and forbear to prosecute. But that's the catch-22. Because some clients want to say, well, I'm expected to do all this stuff, and the immigration department have asked for this, but I haven't got the visa yet. Well, that's true, and the immigration department understand the conundrum. So I've called that the catch-22. So what are the requirements? Well, you need a business plan. So you've got to demonstrate financial resources. Million Hong Kong dollars if you're a non-resident applicant. If you hold an employment visa and you're moving into the status, it's $500,000 Hong Kong dollars. These are minimum. Clearly, if your business plan calls for more capital, you need to have that capital. You need to be able to show that you've got a pathway to getting that capital. The immigration department want to see what the prospective business turnover is going to look like. So they'll call for 2 years of financial projections. Of course, a lot of these could very well be blue sky, and generally speaking, the immigration department don't, go into the financial projections with a particular granular level of assessment to assess their reasonableness or otherwise. But you have to demonstrate as part of the application that you've got a realistic prospect of turning over revenue. The immigration department are looking to see that the activities of the enterprise amount to welcome investment in Hong Kong. So kind of all the good stuff that, the world has got to offer now by way of technology, and it's always been this for the last 20 years. Anything to do with tech is warmly received. If the activity falls within the sort of the rubric of the Economic Development Commission, I think it is, the kind of future plans for Hong Kong, if it falls within the sort of the broader policy diktat at government level, that this activity is going to satisfy our economic development objectives. That's viewed favourably. And we have, of course, our pillar industries, and our pillar industries, tourism, for example, banking and finance, logistics and the like. If the activity falls within our pillar industry activities, then that's deemed to be welcome investment. The investment sum, as I say, is a minimum of £500,000 if you're changing your status from current employment visa through to business investment visa as an entrepreneur, or it's going to amount to a minimum of £1 million Hong Kong dollars if you are a non-resident applicant acquiring this status. Without doubt, the plan calls for the creation of local employment opportunities, and the Immigration Department like to see that new technologies or skills are going to be introduced. The approvability test calls for the following, what I call obvious commitment to the business markers. You need to have suitable business premises. If you plan to run the enterprise from your spare bedroom or your kitchen table, the Immigration Department are not going to accept that. Generally, they want some sort of dedicated offices, which can easily be satisfied these days through core workspace. Then again, if the enterprise requires specific types of business premises, the Immigration Department will expect to see that those business premises have actually materialized in fact. So if you're opening a restaurant, they'll want to see that there's a tenancy agreement for the restaurant premises. The Immigration Department expect to see that the business will create local employment opportunities, and the kind of quality of the jobs is just as important as the number of jobs, and the Immigration Department will accept future jobs rather than immediately recruited local employees. Although I always tell my clients, if it's within your remit to be able to hire talent now before your visa is approved, do that, because it serves to be pretty concrete evidence of your ability to contribute substantially to the economy of Hong Kong, and might lead to a 2-year visa with no business review condition, which is worth it. And then the Immigration Department expect to see that you've got resources available for deployment in the business, and there are typically 4 types of resources. I'll cover these off now and then we'll take a break. So basically, the Immigration want to see that the business has got financial resources. So where's the money coming from? Knowing that the visa applicant needs to engage in an active investment, and the investment needs to come from the business investment visa or the entrepreneur visa applicant. So how's a company going to get its dough? Who are you going to be doing business with? And what support do you have within the local economy in your efforts to contribute requisitely to the economy of Hong Kong? You as an applicant, do you have a good entrepreneurial track record? Have you done this stuff before? If not, how does your employment history to date advantage you in particular activity? And then naturally, if the business is a business that requires licensing, the enterprise needs to have the requisite either license in play or proof of application that licenses are in process. And travel agency, for example, restaurant licensing, for example. If there's any other particular type of registration, let's say you need to have a recruitment license if you're going to be in the recruitment business and the like. And the Immigration Department will basically look to see if the activity itself could amount to a security objection or some difficulty that might befall the entrepreneur in the context of the business plan. If it's something quite esoteric, like as we've seen recently, businesses that are in the NFT space or haven't yet fully completed their licensing applications for the requisite crypto and other sort of blockchain related regulated activity, as this stuff kind of becomes more concrete. And the opportunity now is to sort of look at what I've called the old chestnuts that you hear in the rumour mill. Visa gossip and rumours play a big part of Hong Kong immigration. And so let's just work our way through what I call the old chestnuts. So improving substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong, the naked suggestion that my successful business will be paying tax doesn't amount to anything. Clearly, if you have operated the business and you are paying tax, then that speaks volumes as to the manifest contribution that's resulting as a result of your entrepreneurial endeavours. But prospective tax that hasn't yet been paid, predicated on profits that haven't yet accrued, that don't amount to very much when it comes to demonstrating substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. The proposition that you need, X amount of Hong Kong dollars minimum to qualify for this visa has been around for a long time, ostensibly because there's a great deal of confusion in the market between the 10 million Hong Kong dollars that was for the previous capital investment entrance scheme and the actual funding requirement to be successful when you apply for a business investment visa as an entrepreneur. So there is a functional minimum, which, as I've articulated, is $500,000 if you're an existing resident seeking this status, that is changing from employment through to business investment as an entrepreneur, or at least $1 million Hong Kong if you're a non-resident applicant, but once again, subject to the actual funding need of the business. So it's that. And then clearly you'll hear objections from clients who have got friends who've previously gone through the process of securing this immigration status, and they're quite insistent that what happened in their friend's scenario should actually prevail in their scenario, but no two cases are ever the same. So you can discount, in my view, this old chestnut where they say, my friend got approved, done. So these are, things that you encounter quite often with this particular visa type, and this is my experience that I can share with you in this regard. So, okay, we know what it takes to get the visa approved. How can you improve your chances? What sort of levers can you pull to push the case in the direction of an approval rather than a refusal? If you're a current visitor seeking to acquire this status, then I always say, look, think big, behave big when you're creating your new facts on the ground. Certainly take advice from someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to Hong Kong immigration. And if at all possible, get a named sponsor or someone that's objectively related to the enterprise that will give the immigration department a kind of a warm feeling that the caliber of the local relationships that the parties got in play will add a fill up to the potential for the requisite contribution to result, thereby justifying the grant of the visa. If you are an existing employment visa holder and you're seeking this status, I've said here, wait 3 years. Given recent enhancement measures, the immigration department are not as prescriptive about this. The idea behind waiting a bit since you got your employment visa before you apply for the status is this idea that you can show to the immigration department you've been on the ground long enough in Hong Kong to have built a network and to sort of gotten the lay of the land of what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur in Hong Kong. I don't think specifically you need to wait 3 years, but if you have got 3 years prior experience, that's helpful. I wouldn't specifically push somebody back and say, look, don't apply now because you've only had 18 months. I would still suggest that present sort of circumstances in Hong Kong means that the 18 months or so that you've had under an employment visa, say, will not be held against you if you're seeking to move into this particular visa category, and obviously avail yourself of the kind of reduced expectations of the immigration department in terms of the criteria for approval. So again, think big, behave big. It's about telling a story, carrying an argument. Yes, you've got to have the requisite facts on the ground created to be able to pass the approvability criteria, but you're promulgating a story, so don't hide your light under a bushel. Clearly take advice. And another way to enhance the chances of success if you're an existing employment visa holder wanting to start out on the pathway to entrepreneurship is to join in a side business first. So in all the instances, you've got to be aware of the catch-22. The immigration department want to ensure that the applicant is compliant. But as I say, generally speaking, they don't want to throw logs at the feet of entrepreneurs. And if you're an existing employment visa holder that's joined in the business whilst holding an employment visa, the Immigration Department generally will want to have an accounting for activities that would amount to a breach of conditions of stay by having pre-joined in the business before you get the approval, but they generally sweep up and sort of put that to bed by asking you to execute a Form ID 468, which applies specifically in the context of existing residents who have progressed their plans for the business and could be found out of compliance with their immigration permissions as an employee as they created a new facts on the ground en route to becoming an entrepreneur. And the ID 468 is a kind of a restatement of policy that says, I understand I'm not permitted to establish or join in a business without the consent of the Immigration Department. So you sign that ID 468, and that's forgive and forget. The Immigration Department then move past the transgressions, look forward, and then grant the approval to be the entrepreneur that you've applied to become. So joining in a side business to carry that forward as an enhancement to improve your chances of a successful outcome. As I say, it's not available to visitors. You need to be a existing employment visa holder, and the approvability test in a sense is akin to the full-blown entrepreneur visa scenario, but the Immigration Department will cut you some considerable slack knowing that your enterprise is going to be put forward on the basis of it being embryonic of a contribution to the economy of Hong Kong that can be said to eventually become substantial. And by laying out a whole story that says, look, I'm starting off small, I'm applying for side business permissions first. This is the totality of the plan over the next 2 to 3 years. Laying it out in that fashion sets the scene for the possibility of an adjustment into a full entrepreneur visa, having resigned from your employment once you've kind of gained traction as an approved side business visa holder. And the Immigration Department are obviously engaged right from the very outset of your plans to be an entrepreneur, having started off working on the side in your own business, and then they can obviously see, you know, progress that you made in your side business days into the time when you subsequently, if you do indeed subsequently apply for full entrepreneur visa subsequently. So they've got a record on you basically. And so there is no requirement to be incorporated to start with side business permissions, whereas generally speaking, the Immigration Department would expect to see a limited liability company being the entity supporting a full business investment visa as an entrepreneur. Sole proprietorships are okay if you're starting off small, going on the side. There's no sponsorship issue per se, generally, when you're applying for side business permissions, because you're still going to be working for your current employer while you have your side business activities on the go. However, the condition precedent to get a side business approval is that your existing employer, sponsoring employer, must confirm in writing that they have no objections to you being granted a side business approval. So that necessarily forms an integral part of the process of securing side business permissions to complement your employment visa consents. The one takeaway from this is that the Immigration Department wants to see kind of something meaty in your plan. They're not particularly thrilled with, let's say, a graphic designer who's got a full-time job, wants to take some side gigs. Their employer doesn't care that they do this stuff in their own time, and it's literally just the opportunity to complement existing income stream rather than form the foundation of a business that's, you know, got some, you know, growing ahead of it, and can show that there's something a little bit more profound going on in terms of the reason for joining in the side business while you remain a current employee. So be a bit circumspect as to what the applicant is trying to accomplish by joining in a side business, and understand that if it's If it's small fry, the immigration department might not grant the approval. But then again, it's about telling your story and carrying the argument. So you can make, as I always say, the show pony look like a thoroughbred, right? So special considerations, your existing employment visa is not transferable to your new business. So where you find the applicant is seeking to use the fact of an existing business to go and say, right, which they own, I want to now work for my existing business, therefore I should apply for an employment visa, change of sponsorship. It's not. It's an entrepreneur visa application for the most part. Yeah, you must apply to change your visa category to business investment as an entrepreneur. The approvability test is just as onerous, but you are, as an existing employment visa holder, given the benefits of the doubt. And of course, the catch-22 still applies, which in the context of an existing employment visa holder moving into this status can get cleared up, as I say, on the ID 468 maneuver. So who's going to sponsor a business investment visa as an entrepreneur? Well, you can't self-sponsor, as I said, so you need a third party to execute the sponsorship form ID 999B. And the rationale for the sponsorship arrangement is that it provides the immigration department with a technical mechanism to fund repatriation of the foreign national if the residence goes awry for any reason. Any bona fide Hong Kong resident, indeed a company that's well established, can also serve as a sponsor to a business investment visa as an entrepreneur. And ideally, you'd want to have some sort of nexus between whoever's doing the sponsoring and the applicant and their business, just because it adds sort of, weight to the whole sort of caliber and quality of the story that you're promulgating. And the sponsorship needs to be anticipated at the outset, knowing that it is going to require a third party to play ball. And as I say, in terms of the who piece, be strategic, try and find somebody that the fact that they're executing the ID 999B in your favour will add extra fillip to the overall tone and tenor of your application. So the top tier business investor does not apply to business investors. So you need to have been an employee, an employment visa holder under the general employment policy, and it doesn't apply if you have, for example, gotten an approval to be a business investor. Then you could conceptually pay yourself 2 million Hong Kong dollars in the first year and then get yourself a 6-year visa, and that'd be the end of you needing to be accountable for anything that you attained or achieved under your entrepreneur visa in the first place. So it doesn't apply to business investors, sadly. So in summary, you need the visa when your intention to join in a business is crystallized. Be aware that if you're in Hong Kong as a visitor and you've finished your preparatory phase, you're starting to issue invoice, you're going through the process of hiring people, it's clear that, you're now basically resident in Hong Kong in order to, pursue the business that you've established, or you've joined in with somebody else. Visitor permissions are not appropriate. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't have an application in the system, but the business has started, the immigration department don't have the means to be able to read your state of mind as regards being compliant with Hong Kong immigration law. So having an active application in the system going on subsequent to get approved is how you protect your client from the potential for breach of conditions of stay, all things considered. If you're a visitor and you're clearly running a business and you've been here for a long time, it sometimes can lead to, if not prosecution, it can lead to an investigation, and that just throws so much disarray into the life of the client. So I always say, get your application as soon as you can, particularly if you're a visitor. And if you have an employment visa, stop working for your current employer, you've got a valid limit of stay remaining on your existing employment visa, sitting in Hong Kong under your privilege to reside, which expires at the end of your limit of stay. The privilege to work ceases at the point of stopping to work for your sponsoring employer. So if you're in Hong Kong with a valid limit of stay as an employment visa holder, but possessing merely the privilege to reside, and you've started a business, you need to get your application and to change your visa category. Typically, because you're an existing resident applicant, the Immigration Department will close their eyes to any breaches of conditions of stay by having you sign the ID 468. Either way, the approvability test of demonstrating substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong, in my opinion, is the single most difficult Hong Kong visa challenge that lies ahead. Some visas are really easy, as you'll see. Some visas are somewhat more complicated. The business investment visas and entrepreneurial is the most challenging. So think, act big. Substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong frequently rules out one-man businesses. The Immigration Department expect to see that this business is going to contribute more widely to the economy of Hong Kong and not just to the economy of the individual applicant. It can take between 4 and 6 months for these visas to play their way through, typically 3 months in context of an existing employment visa holder. And the requirements that the Immigration Department put you through can tax your emotional and time resources. So it's good to crack on with it and have your ducks lined up, and be ready to roll your sleeves up and take the requirements of the visa process seriously. And yeah, clearly we're in this game to give our best advice, and therefore we always anticipate that those that are serious about this status will pay someone to help them, and we'll certainly take professional advice to get them where they need to go. And the startup slam dunk approval that I mentioned at the outset of this particular visa type, the accredited programs, can be found here. There might be 1 or 2 more now, but these are the main culprits. Get yourself accepted onto one of these, and you get slam dunk approval as a startup.